thanks, guys. I guess I was following along with Robin's presentation there, and when she got to the spaghetti screens, I sort of felt like my career was in there in different colors. So, as Jennifer said, my background and degree is actually in graphic design and photography. I thought at the time I went to college 30 years ago that I was going to be a newspaper or magazine editor. I actually have a minor in journalism too. But as you would have it, somewhere along the way, I got into the web, and I started at LexisNexis as a graphic designer for print, and ended up managing all of their global marketing websites um, in the late 90s and early 2000s. And eventually that wore thin for me, and I decided to work not in corporate America, but to do something more in public service. So I left there, and I've been at Five Rivers MetroParks now for 13 years. And when I started here, it was more in a marketing capacity, always in sort of a research and project management role. But a couple years ago, my role changed, and I'm now more of a research and analysis person for a broader service for the entire agency and not just for marketing. So among the many tools in my tool belt, I decided I needed to understand how to visualize data better for the purposes of strategic planning and marketing effectiveness, market penetration, things like that. So I went to UD to get their master's certificate in GIS, which, and full disclosure, I did not get to complete because of an ailing parent, but I did go through 3/4 of it before leaving that. So today I'm here to kind of tell you about how I cobbled together a mobile app for Five Rivers MetroParks in short order in a year of a pandemic, and other challenges here at MetroParks. We are under-resourced when it comes to our GIS talent and tools, and so we have to get real creative here in trying to do what we need to do with the budget allocation we have for GIS and with the staff available to do that work. So let me just start off a little bit by telling you about Five Rivers MetroParks in case you guys are not familiar with us. So we're a park district here, mostly in Montgomery County, but not entirely in Montgomery County. We're tax funded by Montgomery County property holders, but we are actually designed to provide green space to people in the entire metropolitan region. And therefore, sometimes when land becomes available for us to protect, it's not actually in the county, and some of it's in Greene County and Warren County and Preble County and Miami County even, but just right on the borders of those things. So our purpose is to protect the natural areas and parks and river corridors, and to promote the conservation and use of those lands and waterways for the ongoing benefit of the people of our region. So mostly recreational. So we don't have sport fields and sport leagues like a lot of other park districts do. We're really about conservation of natural areas. That is about 16,000 acres and about 400 miles of trails across 22 public locations and a handful of non-public locations that we call conservation areas. Those public locations include reservable shelters, campsites, education centers, farms, urban parks, and historical sites, because a lot of the land that was now a park had another purpose before it was a park. And so a big part of our job is interpreting the cultural history of some of the lands that we had. 90% of our land is kept in a natural state. So only 10% of it is developed into trails and roads and public structures. So the rest of it is in a natural state like woods or ponds or rivers. We have about 250 year-round staff across the MetroParks, the bulk of which is in our operations department. So that means, you know, they're taking care of the trails and the parks and doing public programming. And we actually have 0 GIS staff. So that's right, I said 0 GIS staff. So even though we have all this land to manage and parcels to manage and data to track, we have no one dedicated to doing GIS. It's a kind of a GIS by democracy in our department. We have a team that meets on a regular basis with varied levels of GIS skills and interests. And we're right now in the throes of creating a 3-year GIS strategic plan to try to help us to move forward collectively. So in terms of historical use of GIS, we've been using it actually in the agency, mostly in our conservation department for about 15 years. And, our master database has individual records for each parcel that we've acquired over the years and sort of the state of those parcels and where they came from. So we have historical knowledge of all of that. I, as part of the marketing team, have used it for about 9 years in terms of visualizing market penetration or effectiveness of some of our efforts, service reach, potential plans and strategic planning. In our master planning cycles now, as we plan out for the next 10 to 20 years of what people may want to see added to our parks, or if we're going to add additional lands throughout the region based on constituent need, where would that be? And also just general repair and replacement planning, understanding where all the signs are, where all the sewage is, where all the paved parking lots are, so that we can budget and plan effectively for when those things need to be replaced. Right now, we are in a triage mode. So we're doing data inventory, organization, and collection of data across the park district. A lot of our historical knowledge is still in paper form on maps or blueprints. We have conservation data that has been collected over the years with varying levels of accuracy. So cleaning that up is a big struggle for us. We've recently updated a lot of our equipment, and we're moving into using ArcPro across the folks who are using the various softwares in the agency, and we're utilizing a lot of Collector and the other apps, Survey 123, for our efforts. So we're trying to really stay current and educate each other collectively as we move forward. And as part of that, I have been in charge of creating public maps and apps to get some of the data that we're collecting out into the public and improve that experience. We've also got partnerships that we work with a lot in the region, including MVRPC, who's a great data supplier for us. And when needed, if we truly don't have the expertise in-house, we outsource with third-party vendors, or we've been pretty successful in having students come in and do internships from various programs in the region to help us move the needle forward in terms of our data organization, methodology, naming conventions, data organization, all of that kind of stuff, as we're all still relatively new to this internally. So our maps, this is what we have been sharing publicly in terms of maps for MetroParks. So as I mentioned earlier, we have about 22 locations around the Dayton region that have trails or some level of public access that people might want some orientation to before they visit. And these maps are hand-drawn in Illustrator. They're based sort of on reality, but mostly are designed in order to fit on a piece of paper that is easily printed for a brochure. So they've been squeezed or stretched and are not spatially accurate. We have used these on printed brochures, as graphics on our website, at the trailhead kiosks. They're part of signs when you go out into the parks. And some variation of this format has been used for probably 15 to 20 years. Now, a few years ago, there's an app that came out that allowed you to take a PDF and basically show your GPS coordinates on that map. And when using these, it really came to light how poorly spatially accurate these maps really were, and that we really needed a better solution as more and more people had access to mobile devices, and there just became an expectation of having accurate spatial data out there for our user experience in our facilities. So, looking at data that we have available to us, the mobile use of our website, MetroParks.org, is actually a 70% mark. So we're able to tell from our Google Analytics that we use on the website that 70% of the visitors to that site are on a mobile device. So that tells us that we have a pretty good handle on our constituency having access to mobile use. And we weighed back and forth whether to build in more interactive maps on our website or build a full-fledged mobile app. And basically what we learned through doing some benchmarking and research is that we needed to have a different tool for a different job. So users actually prefer a mobile app for navigating versus pulling up a website and clicking and moving around like that. So I actually had to sell this concept of creating an additional tool to management here, just building out additional functionality in our website. By building an app, we were able to customize content in an app differently than what the website has. So website might be used for planning a trip to a park, where the app might be used more when on site, when you're there visiting and really planning your experience on foot or wheel for that matter, or even in boat. So the mobile app allows for usage when cell service is not available. There's a way to cache what's going on in your app. You may have tried this on an airplane, which is always a fun tool to do with some of your navigational apps. You can turn on an airplane mode and it will still show you approximately where you are in the sky, which is kind of fun. Mobile apps also allow for some deeper visitor engagement. So all that said, we decided a mobile app was the way we needed to go. So if we're going to do a mobile app, we need to have some goals for that mobile app. We were intending to find a paperless option to the park brochures we distribute. This, although the project started in 2019, 2020, it became even more imperative for us to have an option, an alternative to the paper brochures we've been distributing, because we decided as a COVID precaution that we were not going to restock paper brochures to prevent any kind of spread of disease in the park. So we have suspended any kind of paper brochure resupply, and we needed to make sure the folks who were continuing to visit our parks, which by the way is in record numbers since COVID has hit us, that they had a way to safely navigate our facilities. We wanted to be able to showcase interesting park features in a more in-depth way than our brochures do today. We already had a lot of content on our website that went in detail with word and picture about specific things or features or historical elements that are in our park. And we wanted to make that kind of a fun, interactive feature of an app that people could be curious about, say, the Witch Tower at Hills and Dales and what the history of that was and what it might have looked like when it was built, things like that. We wanted to be able to provide digital maps that were spatially accurate, as I mentioned earlier, not ones that were squished onto a specific paper size so that they were printed economically. And then we wanted to be able to provide data that we as an agency can manage and update. So there are a lot of other apps out there right now that are crowdsourced that have trail data from our facilities in it, like All Trails or Map My Hike, but we don't have any ability to control the updates to that data. It's user generated, and often people may be traveling on a trail segment that's not actually a legitimate trail. It's a user generated trail that we don't want people to use. Or, we can't add the interpretive information that I talked about earlier in terms of, historical elements or natural features that we want people to explore or know more about. And we want, obviously, an app would provide directional guidance on the ground while folks were using the parks. So additionally, we have these maps that I showed earlier that are embedded on our website, and we were looking for potentially an app solution that would allow us to replace those maps that are on our website with something a little more interactive and spatially accurate than the ones that are currently there today. So with all that said, we decided, do we build an app of our own? Do we hire a consultant to build our app? Could we use any existing app platforms that are out there? When we weighed all of these things and the public dollars it would take in order to pursue it, we decided that using an existing platform would probably make the most sense for us. And it would be, less taxing long term because we don't have to make all the app updates ourselves when all the iOS or the Android foundational changes happen. The third party will take care of that for us. If it's something that's commonly used, then we don't have to work as hard to get people to download it and install it. And, just doing it internally is hugely expensive and resource consuming. And we don't even have a GIS person, and we certainly don't have a mobile app developer in-house. So we went the route of trying to find an existing app platform. This comes OuterSpatial. So OuterSpatial it's almost like a WordPress for mobile apps. So it gives you a tool to load in all of your content. After you provide some GIS spatial information to them in a geodatabase format, you can log into this online tool and supplement the information with descriptions and pictures, and you can even curate outings of collecting points or lines together into an experience that you want people to have. The app OuterSpatial came to us by way of me attending International Trail Symposium, and they were an exhibitor there, and ironically found out that the guy who developed the application, while he's based in San Francisco, he spent ages 10 through 16 living in Dayton, Ohio. So he had a soft spot for getting our trails and our park information into the app, and has worked pretty closely with us. And it's a real point of pride for him to know that there's some penetration here in the Midwest. A lot of the other clients they have are big clients like the National Park Service, California State Parks, a lot of institutions out on the West Coast or in big sky country. And they're inching their way into the Ohio area, and thought we would be a good place to start. And so just to give you guys some background on the cost of this, because I think that other municipalities, even the Oxford trails I heard about earlier, you could upload your geospatial data with them and supplement it with additional information for $2,500 a year, which is extremely cheap if you've ever priced out a mobile app solution. This is way more cost effective than anything we came across. And the first year, there's a $500 setup fee in addition for some training, and just for the general organization of the geospatial information. But really, all in all, it's very cost effective. So they are able to provide us some usage. They're continuing to build out some new tools in terms of data analysis and the usage analysis, and we'll be working with them in 2021 to come up with a way to use the maps that are in the app as part of our website. So it was really, it checked off all the boxes for us in terms of a solution that we needed. So then we get to the data itself. So as I mentioned, I needed to provide them, once we signed our contract and decided we were going to move forward, I needed to provide them with a set of geospatial data that they could then run into the system and troubleshoot with, and then give me access to implementing information in their online manager tool. So they send a welcome package and a data guidebook that kind of gives you a schema of how to put together the individual files, what attributes you would need, and like how to do individual trail segments, things like that. There's a data guidebook and a help library to help you along the way, but their staff was really great in helping this too. We basically gave them three feature files inside the geo database that we provided: a polygon layer, a line layer, and a point layer. And the polygons were our park boundaries. They just showed the outline of each of our parks. The lines were trails that the public would use, and the points And there are a lot of them in our metro parks. The points were all of our points of interest, from, you know, a monument to the fountains at Riverscape, to the tree tower at Cox Arboretum, to where all the bathrooms are, to where all the water fountains are, all the entrances, things like that. When creating or looking at the data we had available, to provide the data sets we wanted to have in the app, we had to look through the data sets that we had collected previously, or data sets that were available from partners like the RTA or MVRPC, to see how we might be able to merge some of those data sets together into this single geodatabase with a polygon, line, and point layer files. So we did have parcel-based polygons on file here, but nothing that was super clean in terms of an exact outline of our boundaries of all of our parks. So there was a lot of work to be done in order to merge all of those individual parcels into an outline. We had incomplete and outdated trail data. The pictures you see here on screen is that in 2016, we actually worked with Google to get a Google Trekker. You can see we could carry it in a backpack on our back. We carried it in a boat on the rivers. We carried it on bikes on the mountain bike trail. And we actually mapped every square inch of the trails that we have in the region. What we did not realize at the time is that the geodata that would create would not be accessible to us. It was proprietary to Google. So I unfortunately did not have a way to export any kind of a vector out of the data we captured in order to have a set of data for ourselves. In hindsight, we should have carried our own GPS devices at the same time that we had all these volunteers go out and do those 400 miles of trail, but unfortunately we did not. We were able to get paved trail data from MVRPC. All of the bikeways that are in the region is something that they have accurate data on. So that is something we didn't have to recapture. And then in terms of all of the points of interest and amenities, we didn't have any of that. If we had any of it, it was very, very little and questionable in terms of accuracy. So here I am, I've got an app, I'm ready to build it, and I'm like, what am I going to do to find all of this data? So I had to get a little bit creative. I created a geodatabase using ArcMap Pro. And for the areas, as I mentioned earlier, I merged parcels and moved any irrelevant areas that might be private and we don't want public access to, and made those into a feature into that geodatabase. For the trails, I merged the line data that we had on file and added that as a feature to the geodatabase. And I actually had to go and screen capture individual Google Street View maps that were from the Google Trekker data that I showed on the last screen. And I geo-referenced those to make sure I had a complete set of trails from that experience. And once I did that, I had to do some snapping and manual topo corrections to make sure that they were all lined up and connected in a way that when processed at OuterSpatial, it would not only show trail distance, but also the topology of the trails themselves. So it shows elevation change, which I can show you when we get to the app. We also have this dilemma here where on the ground, you may look like it's a single trail, but on our maps, it looks like you could have an orange trail experience, a red trail experience, a green trail experience. Those are colored loops that we've defined and people are used to. And so we had to figure out, how do I actually create a footprint in the mobile app that a single trail segment could be on one of multiple colored loops. So I will also show some of that when we get to the mobile app and how I had to work with that issue. And then in terms of creating points of interest, this is where it got really creative. So I find that ArcMap Pro is a little cumbersome, and with working at home during the COVID epidemic, my bandwidth was really slow. And so trying to load thousands of unique points using a satellite view map in ArcMap Pro was difficult for me, so I ended up using Google My Maps in satellite view, dropping points on buildings. So this is not a high degree of accuracy exercise in that like I can zoom in and see where a shelter roof is and drop a point on it. I'm not having like a 3-inch accuracy here. I've got like a, good 10 to 12 feet accuracy going on. So I could just drop points in a Google Maps, My Maps satellite view. And then once I saved those layers in Google, I could export them to a KML and then bring them into ArcMap Pro and merge them into my Geo database and do any kind of corrections that I might need to do there if there was any kind of transition from the projection or the placement of those using the satellite view that's in ArcGIS Pro. So I know that sounds like a lot of work, and it was, and I'm telling you that probably took me hundreds of hours over the course of February, March, and April of this year. But we were all stuck at home with COVID, and I had very little else to do. So it was a passion project at that point. When I had the Geo database ready, I actually made it into an ArcGIS Online map and vetted it with all of our park staff, making sure that it was an accurate representation of their on-the-ground experience in our facilities. And once I got the green light from that, after making a few changes, we were able to send off that Geo database to OuterSpatial, and they were able to import and correct as needed. So after the data was in their system, then we supplemented with descriptions and photos in the manager tool. So just a couple screens here to show you sort of the challenges that I faced. This is an example of what our parcel data looks like. Obviously, I don't want to show everybody these tiny little weird lines like this that are just a right of way. I doubt that the public is going to use anything that's a little tiny sliver like that, and they don't need to see these little cuts and lines that are in our individual parcels. So that's where it became necessary to find a way to merge these and clean them up. This is an example of a screenshot from Google that shows the Google tracker lines created from that backpack. And I could screen capture these and then geo-reference them to create the actual trails in our parks. And this is an example of how I went into Google Maps and dropped points on a Google map for all the individual items that I needed to pull out and showcase to people and describe with word or picture to show them things that they would want to stop or make note of while in the park. And finally, this is a screen capture of what the resulting ArcGIS Online map looked like that I sent out to staff to review to ensure the accuracy of the data. Once it was brought into the manager tool, this is an example screenshot of what I could do for one point of interest. So this would be a dot on the Possum Creek MetroPark page called the Argonne Forest. And here you can see the OuterSpatial app gives me the ability to have a name for that, type it out so that it has a different icon. If it is a part of something else, it can be part of a parent point of interest, and then add a description and up to 5 photographs. And then you save that. And so I had to do that for about 1,000 points of interest in our data set. So what's in our app? Well, we have all of the trails, including hiking, paved, horse, and mountain biking. We have park features that are historical, environmental, or natural features, gardens, and recreational assets. We have user amenities like parking lots, restrooms, drinking fountains, bus stops, and so on. We have rentable facilities, so shelters, campsites, things like that. And then outings, which I briefly mentioned earlier. They are more of a curated collection of other items that are in the app. So it could be a trail that you walk with places that you should stop and things that you should look at along the way. The way we make use of that right now is self-guided tours, or a collection of multiple trails, such as the TBT, which is a backpacking trail that traverses Germantown and Twin Creek Metro Parks. And so it's got portions of 2 parks trails in it, as well as a connector. So after the app was built, and start to finish, believe it or not, this all happened between February and June of 2020. So we made the app available for iOS and Android, and we put marketing information on our website at metroparks.org/mobile, and we ran a marketing campaign across the region, including ads in the Dayton Daily News, some Facebook advertising, and a few other outlets. We also put an ad in our Summer Parkways magazine, which distributed to about 275,000 households in Montgomery County, letting them know it was coming. That issue dropped in June, and we got about 300 people who signed up who said, hey, tell me when that's available. I want to download it. And then we publicly launched on the 17th of July. And as of the last time I looked, we were at about 5,500 downloads to date. And most recently, the story of all of this just won first place prize in the Ohio Parks and Recreation Association Annual Awards of Excellence in the Marketing Innovation category. So this is where I want to check out the app with you all. So let me change up what I'm doing here. I'm going to stop sharing here. And I'm going to start sharing here. Okay. So can you guys see my screen? Can I get a verbal? No?
Not yet.
Okay, hold on. Share screen. Okay.
We see it. We got it
All
now.
Right. Okay, great. So the OuterSpatial app, if you are interested in this and want to go explore it after this presentation, I would highly suggest that you go to metroparks.org/mobile to get it. The trick with doing it via the website is that OuterSpatial is a nationwide app. And so it has some smart features in it that if you click the link from our website, it will automatically put you into the Ohio portion of the app when you download it and open it. If you go just to your app store, whether that's on Android or Apple, you'll have to navigate through and set Ohio as sort of your home area or community. It's just a little bit easier if you do it directly through our website. But once you do have it downloaded, you'll see the icon kind of looks like this little red pointer here. And if I open it up, because I've been in here before, it checks for updates each time that it opens. And up in this upper right-hand corner, you can kind of see where this community drop-down is. It will default to Ohio if you install it via our website. Otherwise, you will have to navigate to Ohio in the communities to find our content. So this is a shared app. It's not ours. We can't customize the icon to make it a Five Rivers Metro Parks logo because multiple institutions have content inside the app. When you land on Ohio, it will feature all of the various entities that have Ohio content in here. And if I scroll down, it will show you right now in Ohio, there are only 2 community partners providing content to OuterSpatial. One of them is us, and the other one is the National Park Service. So the homepage here, when you land, has got a featured area at the top, which is basically kind of a marketing head. Thing is a slider on the homepage of a website, but this is something we can control and we can put in there, but it would be commingled with any other partner's information if you went in there. If you click into our page, it has just specifically our information in a similar format and gives a little bit of background about the organization. Oops, come on. I want to go back. There we go. Additional information on the homepage when you first get there. These are the outings that I mentioned. So these are curated, sort of a collection of experiences. I'll click on one of these in a little bit, but right now what we have in there are guided experiences, things that folks may need some interpretation or direction on as they navigate around a set of trails or points of interest in our facilities. You can also feature content. So we've labeled some of the trails in our district and under different best of lists. And you can pull those out and make kind of a list of all of the best trails for discovering history, or we had leaf peeping this fall, or best trails if you have mobility challenges. So it's a matter of tagging, creating a piece of featured content, and then tagging all the appropriate trails that fit that featured content area. So then I'm going to move down here to the bottom to where these 4 icons are. Home at now. Explore is where I get to the map view. So this shows the state of Ohio when I click on that. And if I zoom in, pinching with fingers, you can see all of our trails. And all the colored dots are the points of interest that I added in to my points layer in the geodatabase. So those range from, as you get closer, they will turn into icons that are separated by point of interest type. So you can see some things of a historical nature. And these are all set types that they create. There is an ability for us to maybe create some new types with them if enough of their customers need another type. But for the most part, we had to stick to the types that they had already generated with other customers previous to us. But if I keep zooming in, you can really see this is at Riverscape. You can see where the drinking fountain is. You can see where snack bar is. You can see invention stations. So this is an invention station that's a pop top can. And if I click on any one of these elements, you will then get a little window that comes up. And this is the content that was added in the mobile app, so or in the manager. So it'll have a photograph, the ability for up to 5 photographs, and then some interpretive information about that particular item. And then there's a map, and it tells you how far I am from that, and even directions if I want to get directions to go to that spot, and any additional information that I may want to share. Now, if I go back and click the trails, this is where it sort of gets interesting. Let me find. So this is the Great Miami River Trail that I just clicked on. And as I load that information again, you get the ability to have a photograph. Oops, sorry about that. I think I've got too much technology doing crazy things here. To pop back in there where I was. I'll click this side, make it easier. Oop. Well, it doesn't seem to like me today. Maybe I'll pick a different trail, see if it's just that one. So this is a Creekside Trail. Let's try that one instead. So the Creekside Trail, you can see again, I'm able to load some pictures and a description in here. But as I scroll down, it will give me a map of it, and it will give you the distance of the trail as well as the elevation. And I'm sorry that that is not working on this particular trail segment. If you click around in this yourself, you will find that we have a variety of those that are working and not working. And that is really a function of us trying to work with the data that we had to clean up and put in here. For every line segment that's in here, they have to be focused in the right direction for the processing to work properly and the elevation to show. So I just happened to pick a bad one here, but I would say 70 to 80% of our trails that are in here have pretty accurate elevation data in them. This just happens to be one that I did not get the right one in there. Okay, so that's a trail. I showed you a point of interest, and then really the polygons just show the outline of a park. So that's what I've selected there, and that's what basically gives us the ability to give an overview of the park itself. And again, it'll tell you the acreage, how many miles it is from where I sit today on my phone, and how to get directions from there. I can even link to documents such as a PDF brochure of the park and any kind of contact information if necessary. Okay. Sorry, there's a little lag with this mirroring. All right. So that's the explore function. You can change your base layers. So you could go to satellite image, and they've recently launched a new version of this that will go to dark mode on iOS automatically if you have that turned on your device, if you want dark mode in the evening hours so it's easier to see. You can click this little icon to center you on where you're at. And there's even a search icon at the top to find something if it's not in your view right there right now. So jumping over, trying to manage my time here, but jumping over to social function at the bottom. So folks are also able to share their experience on the app. So you can see here, it's kind of a running social view of different users across those 5,000 folks who have downloaded the app. They can take pictures of their experiences in our parks and tag it, and folks can like it or comment on it throughout the application, which is pretty cool. We launched a trail challenge in conjunction with the launch of the app itself. And so there were 25 different trails that were in here that folks could follow the kind of curated path or segment that we're suggesting that they take to complete a challenge. And I probably had 150 posts of people just tagging various trail segments of the Trails Challenge earlier this year, which was really cool. And then the last icon that's across the bottom that we hadn't really talked about is the me icon, and that just gives some background on myself. And with enhancements that are coming in next year, you can see the challenges part of that will actually be in this app, so people could sign up for a challenge and track their which segments they've completed and be able to turn that in for a contest that we're doing. So we'll be doing that in 2021. Now, the last thing I want to show you is the outings function. So the Carriage Hill Historical Farm, because of COVID, this is typically something that is open to the public, and they can go in the barns and they can see all the historical buildings, but we have had to close everything up since March. So this was a way to allow folks to still get some of the guided experience that they would have had if our interpretive staff were on site with them. They get a little bit of an overview here, and here's an example of that elevation that you can see that is automatically calculated from the data as I created this. But it creates a map with stops on it, and obviously you want to start with the lowest number, but it starts with this at the point where the green dot is. At here, the green and the red dot for end are at the same location, so you've got kind of a split icon. But then in each of these stops along the way while you're navigating it, you can click the individual points of interest, and it will give you background on that specific item. And then you can walk on and stop at the next stop and learn about this item. And it's a way for us to really share a lot of that cultural history in a new way without having to have staff in the park do it. So it looks like my app quit on me again, and I guess that's a good time to stop here and maybe give you guys a chance to ask me any questions if you have that.
Well, thank you, Amy. This was incredible. We do have a couple of questions. From Jen, do you have a roadmap, so to speak, that you would be able to share with other park systems looking to implement this type of mobile app?
I think I could probably document it. We don't have any roadmap on paper. Unfortunately, this was sort of fly by the seat of our pants, as I'm sure you guys can all appreciate. It was really a matter of us trying to generate this as quickly as possible and getting it into the hands of users, as we had so many new users that were flocking to the park with COVID.
So I would, from an external perspective, I would consider this to have been a success in that aspect. Internally, do you all feel that this was the flaming success that it really appears to be?
I think we are very, it's interesting because the intent was to have this be a tool for the general public to use. What has happened is that our park managers are even using it to navigate their own facilities and to figure out where things are in their parks. Because they weren't even fully aware of where everything was or what the background of things were. So there's, distinct departments within our organization that focus on interpretation versus, operations or whatever. And sometimes not all of the information share happens internally the way it should. And it takes a project like this for them to be able to see everything kind of organized and in one environment. I do think that we have seen that, our data is not perfect, and we knew that. You can see the way I generated it. It was non-scientific, but it was the best we could do in a short amount of time to try to achieve the goals of the project. And so what it has prompted us to do is to reconsider how we might go back and fix any of the data accuracy issues that might be discovered through this process, and then update the information on file here in our base data, and then again, obviously resupplying OuterSpatial with any updates that we would have to the geodatabase, which I did not mention, but I am monthly providing them a brand new geodatabase that I tell them which particular items need to be updated when I provide that.
You might be interested in reaching out to some local GNSS system providers, such as Precision Laser and Instrument, or
Yep.
There's the one they sell, EOS. They're up off of Dayton Yellow Springs. I cannot remember. Fondriest Environmental. I know that both of those organizations and the MVCC, Miami Valley Communications Commission, have, I think that's what it's called, have rental or GPS equipment that they would love to have people use in order to show what their GPS equipment to do. And you could have a scavenger hunt where somebody slaps on one of these backpacks and hits one of those trails in order to get you some really good 3D data, especially with leaf.
Oh, yeah.
Something to consider during this time of year.
That's a great idea.
Valerie Taylor says you are a valuable asset to Five Rivers, and you have improvised to accommodate for tools the organization lacks. Excellent presentation with thorough explanation. Concur.
Thanks.
I had two questions. Have you considered whether or not you can extract the vector data that Google Trekker collected from either Google Maps or Google Earth as a KMZ or KML file and then import that into ArcGIS?
Yeah, that was one of my first things that I tried to do, and that is when we went back and looked at the contract that we signed with Google at the time that we took on Trekker, we somehow glazed over that paragraph that those files would not be available to us. If somebody out there figures out a way to extract KML files from the Google Street View view of Google Maps, please let me know, because I have tried to look under every rock, and as far as I can tell, it's proprietary information.
Okay. And have your Google Analytics broken down viewership by gender? And the reason I asked this in particular had to do with color vision impairment, but I'm really just curious about how Google Analytics breaks that down.
I would think that Google Analytics right now would have to use supplemental third-party information to get anything about gender, race, things like that. Right now, it basically can only read that somebody's got an IP address, right, and where they're at. It doesn't know anything specifically about them unless they're supplementing it with third-party data.
Well, I think amazing, wonderful tool. I use AllTrails, and this is even better than that for sure. And I think that it's done a really wonderful job of making this more accessible to people who may have other inabilities or difficulties with hearing or vision to be able to get a better idea, especially about those cultural resources during a time when interpretive staff can't be on site. So this was a really wonderful presentation, which is being echoed by others in the comments, and we very much appreciate you sharing this with us. This was great.
Thanks. And I will say that since we won the Ohio Parks and Recreation Association Award, that gets a lot of coverage with other park districts in Ohio. And OuterSpatial has received about 5 other phone calls from park districts in Ohio who are interested in potentially putting their parks and trail data into the app. So we see that as a huge benefit, is because if more people in Ohio and in the region put their data into this application, it'll become more of a go-to tool for folks. They won't have to think about, oh, that's the one that MetroParks uses. It will be the one that everybody uses, right? So it's a great way for us to build kind of continuity in trail and park information in a mobile